we are going to kick off the afternoon session really speaking about tutoring. My name is Dawn Mokuau. I am the Student Equity Tutorial Coordinator. Joining me, and I'll have everyone introduce themselves as the panel members.
Hi, my name is Elaine Alvarez. I'm the Department Chair of the Learning Assistance Department and our Learning Assistance Center Coordinator.
I'm Lizzie Brock. I'm English faculty, and I coordinate the English Embedded Tutoring Program.
I'm Angela Tren, and I'm a peer tutor at the Learning Assistance Center for Nutrition.
Hi, I'm Alfred Morales, and I'm a student here at City College of San Francisco.
I'm Paula Mack, and I'm the lead tutor for the Embedded Tutoring Program.
All right, and our goals for today's panel is really to learn about the learning assistance and the English department's approaches to tutoring, to be able to share ideas for how to leverage tutoring to increase the success of students, particularly those of equity populations, and then to be able to take away some ideas to consider or implement. So before we get started with our panel discussion, what we wanted to do is just offer some grounding, some common language when we're talking about tutoring. When we look at the district, there's tutoring all across, and we have different ways and methodologies in which we offer tutoring. So in the center of this particular chart, we always wanted to place students and faculty. So really, of course, our goal is to assist students within their academic and also their personal endeavors, but we recognize that really that learning is to also assist our faculty in helping you really continue that learning of that content, of those service learning outcomes, really developing the whole person in the classroom, extending it outside in the classroom as well. So in the center are our students and faculty. Now, the different approaches to tutoring here on campus, there you may find peer tutors or professional tutors that are in the lab or center, so they can offer tutoring within a drop-in basis. So it really works with students' schedules. If they are unsure of what their day looks like, they can come in for a drop-in tutoring session, or they can make an appointment with a tutor within the center. In addition to that, you'll hear more from our coordinators about the embedded tutoring program. So with an embedded tutor program, they are linked to a course and with a faculty. And really that embedded tutor is that conduit between students and faculty. They really help to bridge that gap between course content and that student learning experience. And then another kind of approach to tutoring is the supplemental tutors. So again, also those tutors could be a peer or professional. They are connected to a specific course and a faculty, and they offer sessions outside of the class that are in step with what is happening within each course lecture. So that's a supplemental tutor. So those are some of the just kind of common language when we're talking about tutoring across the district. And now what I wanted to do is just hand it over to Lizzie, and she's going to go into the English Embedded Tutoring Program.
The English department has a number of different tutoring programs and options, including peer and faculty drop-in tutoring and the Writing Success Project, which works with the English department. The one that I coordinate and Paula is the lead tutor of is the embedded program. And we work with a number of tutors, each of whom are assigned to 3 sections of our new 6-unit English 1A, 1AS class. They go to about a third or half of the class hours, and they keep up with the readings and assignments. They work as supplemental instructors in the classroom and also model students. And then they offer appointments and drop-in and group tutoring outside of class. They also establish relationships with the student that go beyond what they might have with the teacher, and they can refer students to resources. They communicate regularly with the teachers so that if a student has kind of 2 options to form a bond with the 2 different educators in the classroom. And they take part in their own ongoing support and professional development, workshops, off campus, on campus. They do self-evaluation and peer evaluation and a number of things. So we serve a lot of students is the point of this slide. And so about, around 600 or more unique visits. So that's students coming in outside of class to see our tutors, and total visits up in the 2000s. When we have 10 tutors on or 11 tutors on, then we're able to serve over 1,000 students if you're counting the time that students have in the classroom. Many teachers require the students to do at least one tutor visit, and in that case, we're seeing, hopefully, every student in the class at least once. 46% of the students served in the past year or two have been underrepresented minority students. So that shows the who is using the tutoring. And as you can see, many of the groups are disproportionately, in a good way, using the tutoring. So we can always improve and see more students, but in general, we are seeing the students that we hope to be seeing. And that's the big question, right, is were the students more successful than if they didn't go to tutoring? And yes, and I've been told this does not just represent a correlation, but this actually proves that our students are doing better because they go to tutoring outside of class. So if you look at the bars, the blue bars are the students who went to their own assigned embedded tutor outside of class time and passed the class. This reflects our old sequence, right? We're offering different courses now, but in the old sequence. The blue reflects the students who went to tutoring and passed, and the red reflects students who didn't, or reflects the general population of students taking that course. So we're comparing students who went to tutors to everybody. We're not even comparing students who went to tutors to students who didn't go to tutors. We're just comparing students who went to tutors to everybody. So you can see that's a lot higher. And then the tall bar on the right, the yellow one, represents of those who went to tutoring, what were their retention rates. And I don't have the comparison, but those are pretty high retention rates. So it's accomplishing the goal of both keeping the students there and helping them to pass their classes at much higher rates. And that's a snapshot of student responses from one semester, although it's been pretty consistent throughout the semesters that we've done these surveys. For most of them who go, it helps them a lot, or at least somewhat. And what we expect is that they say that it helps them with their writing, which indeed 75% say that. But then it also helps with all of those other things that make it possible to do well in an English or any other class. Reading comprehension and study skills, and even 30% said they were referred to another resource on campus, which we know here is we have lots of resources, but often the students don't know about them.
So again, my name is Elaine. I'm the chair of the Learning Assistance Department and the Learning Assistance Center. I wanted to talk just a little bit about what our format is, which is a little bit different than the English department and the English Embedded Tutoring Program. So the Learning Assistance Center is one of the largest student employers on campus in a centralized location. The majority of our program is run by peer tutors. And I'll talk a little bit about the breakdown of peer tutors, professional tutors, faculty support, and our setup. So because, we employ so many peer tutors and we're such a large hub for tutoring, and we offer tutoring in a variety of disciplines. So, it could be the sciences, it could be languages, mathematics, and so there's a range of tutors that we need to cover the disciplines. So because of that, we really strive hard to help the peer tutor themselves develop as a whole. And we'll talk a little bit about the requirements. One of our guest speakers earlier, Jennifer, was saying, just because someone has a good grade in a class doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be, they're fit to be a tutor just because of the grade. So what we learned is we wanted to provide ongoing professional development, and this came over, several years of realizing where our strengths are and where some improvements could be. And so we focused a lot of our professional development on transactional tutoring strategies, self-awareness of the tutor themselves, understanding cultural awareness and bringing that humility to the tutoring session to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the diverse populations that are on campus. So a little bit of a breakdown of how we work. We employ about 80 to 100 student employees every semester. I'd say about 80% of that are peer tutors. We also have computer lab assistants who can help students, on their computer work, accessing Canvas, but the majority of our program is led by peer tutors. We also have professional tutors, and so we hire those tutors, and they bring an additional element and an additional level of expertise to the program. They offer supplemental workshops, which we'll talk a little bit about, and some of those supplemental workshops actually came out of, those tutors realizing, I see a lot of students coming with the same questions, so let's go ahead and see if the faculty would be okay with me offering a supplemental workshop, and I'll give you some examples of what that looks like. They mentor the peer tutors, and they also provide consistency. So our tutors are students. They're very busy. They have very busy lives, and so we really want to make sure that, we can have someone who can be providing a service, 25, 30 hours a week. And so it's a great balance between the peer tutors and the professional tutors. We're strictly drop-in, so we do drop-in only. Students can drop in at any time to come and see a tutor, and we prefer the sessions are about 20 to 30 minutes in length, depending on how busy we are and what the student needs at the moment. So this is a little snapshot of our, sorry, I was doing so well, of our peer tutoring program. So this is sort of a summary of what we offer. So our training program is a combination of a 1-credit class, which is known as Learn 10 Introduction to Tutoring, and also with the Equity Tutorial Services Coordinator who joined our team in Equity, she also offers an Equity Series workshop for students. And so we've created different opportunities for the students to receive training. This is sort of a summary of what some of those outcomes are. And we learned that with the training, 1-credit class can be difficult for some students, and the time commitment and when it's offered can be a challenge. And so the series workshops came in and offered a different opportunity. It has a little bit of a different lens. The emphasis is really on cultural awareness and humility throughout the entire training program, but also really integrating some of those transactional tutoring strategies. Our program, which we're very proud to say, is certified by the College Reading and Learning Association, so CRLA, if you're not familiar with that. In my research, I learned that they did a visit here back in the 1980s. So if you were here, maybe you know of the program. So they're an internationally recognized tutor training program certification program, and what they do is they offer a nationally and internationally recognized certification for a program who can then certify the tutors that go through that program. And really what that offers is it connects us to a wider community, the tutoring profession, expertise, it creates a community, and it really creates a set of standards for how we can train our tutors to make sure that we're delivering services that are on par with the profession. And so our program is CRLA certified, and the minimum requirements of that, as you can see on the board, which both the Learn 10 and the Equity Series workshops meet, is they have to have 10 hours of instruction in person. Most of our training goes beyond that, and 25 hours of supervised tutoring, and then everyone does have to complete an observation by their supervisor. So we're really proud of being able to offer a training program that is in par with the tutoring experts and profession out there. So this is just a snapshot of some of our professional development opportunities. And as you can see, These came out of the needs of our students, as well as feedback from the tutors themselves, feedback from faculty. What can we be doing within our program, since just teaching tutoring strategies might not be the answer. And so we offer content-specific workshops, a variety of college success, and then we developed a cultural awareness and communication series to really make sure that we are continuously working with the tutors to make sure that they feel confident and they're meeting the needs of the students on an ongoing basis. One thing is our collaboration and communication. So if throughout this presentation you're thinking to yourself, how come my class doesn't offer that? Or how come my program or my department isn't offering that? We want you to reach out to us. So as a Learning Assistance Department, we are here to support other departments at the college. We're here to provide that academic support and work in connection with you. So we really pride ourselves on doing classroom presentations. We do an all-in-one student orientation at the beginning of the semester, and we bring in guest speakers. So we brought in DSPS, we brought in the Student Health Center, our Title IX coordinator, we brought in ESL faculty. And so, if you have something that you want to bring to the table, we really want you to be part of the training that we're offering our student tutors. So this is the data. It's a similar explanation as Lizzie gave. And as you can see, we do serve a lot of students. And I just wanted to, this is specifically for the LAC, Learning Assistance Center, and tutoring. What this doesn't include is also computer assistants or students coming in to use study rooms. And so what we like to recognize is that we have a large proportion of our students coming and visiting us, but they're also returning, and we love that, okay? And there is a slight decrease in some of those numbers, and we just want to say we're okay with that because we've learned that tutoring has expanded. Tutoring is being offered in very different departments and areas, and so we're okay that not everyone is coming to the Learning Assistance Center as long as the students are getting the support that they need. So this is a snapshot of who's using our services. And the majority of our students are Asian, followed by Latino, Latina, or Latinx, white, and African American. So the data shows that the populations visiting the LAC is proportionate to the populations at City College San Francisco as a whole. The majority of our students who come here are in that sweet spot range of about 19 to 29 years of age. So that's about 70% of the students that are visiting us. And this was a 3-year period of data. It included fall 15 to fall of 2018. The ratio of male to female students is similar to that on campus, and 45% of the students who attend tutoring in the LAC are male, while 55% of them are identifying as female. So we do have a higher proportion of students with disabilities, veterans, and foster youth, which are all represented in the students that do visit us. And one thing I do want to say is we always talk about the students that come to us, but we also want to reach the students that are not coming to us. So to us, this is great, but of course it's not good enough, right? We want to get to the students who might not be using our services, or find out, what we can do differently, or maybe go to those students, go to your department, go to a different area to offer that tutoring support. So we wouldn't show you data that meant we weren't doing our jobs well. Well, we would if that was all that we had, but thankfully the data showed that things are working out quite well. And so as you can see, again, it was done the same as Lizzie talked about, the idea that it's across the board CCSF students. So students who access tutoring in the LAC itself was at an 80% or higher, in that 80% range, which we're okay with. We think that's a pretty good number. We look forward to that number increasing, and it's slightly higher than the average success rate. And if you haven't been told yet, the success means a grade of passing, an A, a B, or a C. And this is just a snapshot of some of our data. You can always go to our website. We are transparent. Our data is on there. This was data pulled from fall 17, where we were trying to gauge how students were feeling about the services. And the question ranged from extremely confident, not really, somewhat, or is neutral somewhat, and then not at all. And so the students identified that, you know, they're feeling pretty good about the services that they're getting, and that it's really encouraging them to feel better about their academics, to apply some of those strategies, and then also feel confident in accessing services elsewhere on the campus.
All right, so now that we've kind of had some grounding and some information, let's get to the good stuff, the panel discussion. So we're going to start with Alfred and Angela, and before we kind of dive into this question, we wanted to just offer more time to learn more about who you folks are, your kind of academic endeavors and hopes and dreams. So I'll start off with Alfred.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alfred. Again, I'm a CCS student here. With me, the reason why I'm basically in school is because so I can major in psychology. My big goal, like 5-10 years from now, is to graduate with a bachelor's in psychology. My mission now, thank you. My mission now is to assist at-risk youth or those incarcerated or involved in the juvenile justice system. And that actually also comes from personal experience as well, being a foster youth as well. Doing this makes me feel very validated and also gives me the knowledge I need to basically reach other people and have them come towards success. And also, I kind of see this correlation with tutoring. With Paula, me working with Paula in English 1A, she definitely helps me fine-tune my essays, helps me fine-tune the assignments, see where I go wrong, and we discuss about where we can improve in the program, in class, and definitely in the assignments I create. And doing so, this actually helps me be more successful, more fluent, more talkative, and yeah, I definitely see this as an absolute help towards me, because if I weren't to be in this tutoring program or in this session, I don't think I'd be passing 1A. I think I'd have to retake it again. But with that being said, trial and error, absolute process of life, and I'm definitely glad to be here. Definitely glad to participate with the tutoring program.
Great, thank you, Alfred. And Angela?
Yeah.
Okay, I got all these mics coming out.
Double mic.
All right. It's all right. All right, so I am a peer tutor in the LAC, and I arrived there because I was failing OChem one semester, imagine that. And when I arrived, someone had said, you should go try tutoring. So when I went to the LAC, there were no organic chemistry tutors. So I subsequently dropped out of that class, but feeling defeated, I did attempt the class again, but I also felt that since the LAC is missing tutors, maybe I should go and become a tutor. And here I am, being a tutor my second semester, but this is also my last semester. I wish I had discovered it a lot earlier. And yeah, is that?
Absolutely. Thank you. And just so that we can have an understanding, what do you hope to do academically and professionally?
So I am moving on to SF State in the dietetics program. I originally wanted to become a dietitian because, one, I am actually very passionate about nutrition, healthy foods, and I also feel that food brings people together. I had also noticed something in my own personal life is that, okay, my father passed away when he was 64, which I think is a very young age. But because he had a poor diet, okay? But that and noticing that my friends' parents were, coming to a point in their life where they needed to change their diet, and they would go and see the dietitian, and they would come back and they go, you know what, they wanted me to eat this, that, and whatever. And so what I saw was very low to no compliance. And I realized that was happening because the recipes or the suggestions they were getting was not very culturally attuned. They're not used to eating that kind of food. They're just gonna be like, no, that's okay, and they're gonna continue doing what they have been doing. And so I felt that because maybe in the dietetics, field that we were underrepresented. And even being in the Bay Area where it was so diverse, and I'm originally from Houston, Texas, so I know about non-diversity. So I decided that that was the road that I was going to take, is become a dietitian and to be able to help support and do outreach for people in my community.
Thank you both for sharing. And so for question one, this is again targeted for Alfred and Angela. What was your perception of tutoring?
So originally, my perception of tutoring when I first started in City College was definitely a resource that you didn't really want to take, just in case it was just like a fail-safe, or like, oh man, I'm really not doing great on this assignment and it's due, in a week's time? I think I might need help. More than just my classmates, or more than just the class time with my teacher. And also, by the same token, my teacher, Miss Alex, was definitely pushing it to the class that, hey, Paula's our embedded tutor, definitely see her. She has a schedule, like totally sign up when you can. And so I went my first time pretty early on in the semester, and I was just like, okay, what goes on? I haven't really been tutored before. And so it's not a one-way street. It's not just oh, here you go. It's a two-way discussion. It's we both learn from each other. That's what all humans do. We all learn from each other, whether it's a book, whether it's social media, whether it's, interpersonal communication. And so now with my perception of tutoring, it's absolutely different. It's a definitely helpful resource. And if I could recommend it to someone, I'd do it in a heartbeat. I'd definitely say, hey man, there's this awesome tutoring service, and hey, if you really want to succeed in your classes, if you really don't want that pressure on you that you got to get assignments done by yourself, definitely reach out to someone, and there's tutors for that.
So my perception of tutoring was, like I said, when I came, there weren't any OChem tutors, but when I first came on board as a peer tutor, I thought, okay, well, I know a lot about nutrition, I got a good grade, I'm just going to sit there and, just tell them what I know. But being able to be trained by the team that Elaine and Dawn and Vita has provided has really opened up my perception of what tutoring is and also being able to be a current student, I'm able to also just be in that space emotionally and mentally with them. Like, we're all going through finals together. We're all scrambling around. We know how difficult it is to get everything done on time. But being able to have the tools to be that safe space or that safety net for the student who is coming in. They're not there just for tutoring. They're like, okay, I'm not doing well, but did they show up? And for the training that we have received is to understand how to meet the student where they are, and that also reminds me to meet myself where I'm at. So whether it's my own personal biases or my privileges or bringing cultural awareness and knowing that there's all these other resources on campus that I'm able to pass on to the student who is there in front of me. Maybe they're there for nutrition, but really they need some help with something else. Maybe they have an undiagnosed learning disability, or they're going through something and they didn't know that there was like health services. They can get mental health help on campus. And so being able to be there for my peers has been an amazing experience, because I've also been there where there was nobody.
All right. Question two, we kind of touched upon it, but again, for Angela and for Alfred, if you want to go into it a little more, how did you get to tutoring?
Yeah. So for me, when first day of class, I was in, I think it was in the classroom, and the teacher introduced herself, and she also introduced Paula. And she described her as a great tutor. They definitely work with each other. And Paula does come at least 2 times out of the 3 classes each week. And also is not afraid to pass out her schedule and be like, hey, definitely sign up. Or even in the class, if we have an assignment that we're working on and while the teacher's talking, like she's pointing out, she's also like saying, oh, here's what we need to work on, here's what we need, like here's what we're at right now. Let me know if you have any questions on it. And you know, going through 1A, it was definitely a struggle. It's just because it's in the closing month doesn't mean it's over yet. Finals is of course raining down upon me with a really big storm. So definitely going to see Paula at least I want to make it a goal saying 5 times to fine tune the essay and submit it on my college career and what I want to pursue in order to, you know, just live life. And so I think next semester with the retention rate, I'll probably be part of the statistic and say, hey, I'm back, let's go, let's do it. And yeah, that's how I got there.
Okay, I just lost my train of thought. But so how did I get to tutor? How about like why am I staying as a tutor? I'm actually taking 3 units this summer called College Success. So that I can work as a tutor this summer as a nutrition tutor. And I know that nutrition is going to be, you know, slammed into 6 weeks, and that can be a lot. I have encountered in the time that I spent at LAC a lot of tutees that were English language learners. And a very surprising thing that I've learned when I was invited to speak here at the Symposium, which I'm honored to be here, is that nutrition was one of those courses that is a stumbling block where people who don't pass nutrition don't go on into the allied health fields. And I kind of made the connection at that point that a lot of these people who are more of my culture or similar aren't making it through nutrition. I mean, there's the ones that do finally show up at the LAC are English language learners, and they're having some barriers, and then they end up they don't ever become a dietitian because they just stopped at nutrition. And that may be why we're underrepresented in the field. And so that's why I'm staying on one more summer. And it's bringing me back.
All right, question 3. I think for Alfred, what brought you back to tutoring? You kind of touched upon it. And then for Angela, you know, you also mentioned it. What brings those tutees back to tutoring?
Okay, what brought me back? I want to say it wasn't just the mandatory, oh, hey, just letting you know you have to see Paula at least once. It was definitely seeing Paula once on my own and then just repetitively coming back. I'm like, hey, does this paragraph title all the questions that the teacher's asking me, or I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Or, you know, is there anything else that you're really confused on about these readings? And having that available to me on a weekly basis absolutely helps. And it's not to the point where you have to squish everything into a 30-minute session. I have the ability to see her twice a week, as every other student has. And, you know, it's an absolute treat. It's absolutely, you know, we get down to business, we have our laughs, we have definitely thoughtful conversations on the topics that we're working with. And it definitely opens my mind to a lot of things and how I can use that in the assignments I have and the work I create.
Can you repeat what you were?
Yeah. Angela, from your observation, what do you believe brings tutees back to tutoring?
From my own personal observation, there was something that we learned in training was that there are different learning styles, and to figure out what our own learning preference is, to be aware that there are different preferences, and that how to speak to those different preferences, that even though they're different, like, for example, I'm much more visual and kinesthetic, and I like to talk about things, and other people have different preferences. They like to read and write, and being equipped with those tools and that knowledge, which we learned through our training, has enabled me to help more students, I believe, that for whatever reason, like if they're in the classroom and they're kind of understanding what the teacher is teaching, but not really, but because their learning style is different than how the teacher is purveying the information, then they get to come to tutoring and for us to work out and figure out what their learning preference might be, and then start having them go over that information and that knowledge in the way that they like to. And then it becomes much more engaging, it becomes much more helpful, and they feel okay to make mistakes because I'm also a fellow student, and I'm not like, I don't have like these huge expectations to be like perfect or know all the answers. And as soon as I don't know the answer, I'm like, hey, let's go figure it out. How about you figure it out? And it helps, it becomes much more natural for them to figure out what's gonna work for them. And I think that's what brings tutees back, and then we build a rapport, and learning's fun. Fun again.
All right. Question 4 for Angela. In your experience as a peer tutor, what is important to you?
In my experience as a peer tutor, I believe what's most important to me is having been able to make those connections, both on a social, emotional level, because I get to interact with people who are outside of my class, and I have 3 kids, so that they're, I get to interact with people who are over the age of 13, so that's always fun. But it's well, I guess my mindset now is that I'm moving forward away from CCSF. I'm going on to SF State and continuing with my career goals. But what's been really important to me is the training and the personal growth and the professional development that I've received while I was here. That I'll be able to, one day when I become a dietitian and someone comes into my office or wherever I may be out in the field, but I'm able to connect with those people at a level that will help them take control of their diet and their life and better themselves. But those are skills that I learned here at the LAC in CCSF. And that's been the most important factor to me. Thank you, Elaine, Dawn, and Vita.
All right, moving on to question 5. It's for Paula. What does your role as an embedded tutor fill?
Okay, hi everybody. Okay, well, with an embedded tutor, we're also known as the professional tutors, and a major role that we do play is we enhance learning. And there is one philosophy that I have. It is that we have information every day. We read information and it's given to us. But with tutoring is that hopefully we can turn that information into knowledge. That's really how I would approach tutoring. And how do we enhance learning is that for me, I often highlight what the teacher expects. And being in the class, sitting in the class, following the reading, the curriculum, I know exactly what the teacher expects. So I would reinforce that to the students so that they understand that it's actually, with academic, it isn't just doing your work. It is actually having a relationship with your instructor, knowing what that instructor expects and how you could deliver that is a collaboration in itself, okay? And another way is that we often have students come in with their papers and there's a lot of feedback on that paper and they don't know where to begin. How do I get into this paper again? So part of our job in enhancing learning is to walk that student through with all the feedback. And I, again, reinforce the idea is if your instructor had given you feedback, you do not ignore that feedback. They took the time to give you feedback. So your job is to go over that and go back into your paper and try to work it through. And I'm here to help you. I'm not here to do it for you, okay? And there's so much I can talk about with enhancing learning, but one more thing that kind of stick to my mind is I recently got a pie paragraph poster for our work area, and I always enforce the pie paragraph because no matter how much you're taught the pie paragraph, again, it's just information, right? Until it becomes knowledge is when the student can actually apply it, practice it, and kind of interact with it over and over again. Then it becomes knowledge. So I always, before the student leaves, I'll always say, use that pie paragraph. Put it in your head, put it in your mind, practice it, use it. When you get home tonight, think about the pie, Oh, okay, so there it is. So one of the most important things is we enhance learning.
For those of us who are English adjacent, what is that pie diagram paragraph?
Oh, the pie paragraph. Well, P is your point, the topic sentence. I is your information, which is your evidence, supporting details. And then, of course, the E is the elaboration, where you explain the how and the why your evidence supports your topic. It sounds easy, right? But when you actually do it, right? Alfred would agree with me, it's not easy. And so, it takes practice. Critical thinking is the E part, right? That's the part that demands a lot of your brain cells. So, yeah.
Thank you. Hold, please. Yeah, question 6.
Okay, I could say the next question. The next question is, how do you create cohesion in the classroom as an embedded tutor? So in the classroom, again, Alfred mentioned we visit the classroom 2 times a week. And in the classroom, I would like to think that we're part of a community in the classroom. We're part of a family. Instructors build that with the class, right? So we try to be part of that. And we're visible. I mean, when we're sitting there, I take notes as well. Students can see that I'm a learner as well. And if I had worked with an instructor and I'm working with the instructor again, I would still take notes because there might be some nuggets that I didn't catch the prior semester, so I would still take notes. I would still reread some of the chapters if I have to. And then, so part of that family in the classroom, I monitor, circulate myself around in the computer lab. We would try to kind of for me, I would kind of work with the student one-on-one, especially those students who have not seen me for tutoring. I would try to not really tap them on the shoulder, but kind of be near them, okay? And then I would also, another thing is that students are very aware of instructor and tutor, the collaboration, and having that awareness is also important, and that's part of that, building that community. Instructors would actually let me look at essays, and then we would write down names of students who need extra help. And then my job is to reach out. Sometimes we reach out together, instructor and tutor, but that is another way in which we are like a family. And at the end of the school year, we participate in the parties, everything. So that is fun. But if we're not in the classroom, again, it's a community. Students know that we're not there. Where's the tutor today? Yeah, right, Alfred? Okay, thank you.
And really ending on a final question and open for all panel members, what do you enjoy about tutoring?
Okay, for me, I guess I'll just shoot it off again. What do I enjoy about tutoring? Like Paula said, information does become knowledge. What I have after the sessions that I have that I take from what Paula says and what the classes show me is definitely useful, and it's absolutely wonderful to see that, you know, what I think I could do alone is absolutely different from what I could do with help and actually reaching towards a common goal. Because Paula, of course, wants to help us succeed, but sometimes in classes the professor will be like, "Oh, it's the survival of the fittest. May the best survive." But you know, it's absolutely it's an awesome process. How tutoring gets more in depth than just, "Oh, here you go." It's not that simple, and I'm really glad that it's a great conversation between us, me and the tutor, to, you know, learn from each other, and that's why, you know, I really enjoy it. Paula, yeah.
Oh, what do I enjoy? I think I said it all at first. I think it's when I work with a student, I think about myself, because I was tutored by my brother in math. I was also tutored by an English tutor myself when I was younger, in elementary school and high school. So I really value that one-on-one connection with a tutor. Mm-hmm. I'm still in touch with her today, so. Mm-hmm.
So what I enjoy about tutoring, I think that I had mentioned it earlier, is really learning how to meet people where they are. And because in theory, this is how you do it, there's these different things, but you know, everyone is different, and every interaction is going to be different. And so I really enjoy those nuances, and I learn a lot about myself and the other person, but I think that's the best thing. It's just learning how to meet people where they are.
You're good.
All right, that really concludes our time together. There was one question, yeah.
You mean, do students know that there's an embedded tutor attached to the class? Yes, they do. It's put on the class schedule. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We just started doing that recently because we've just been able to guarantee, well, close to guarantee, that certain classes will have tutors. So yeah, and so counselors can recommend students take that, and especially with our new 6-unit English 1A course, the idea is that it provides additional time in class with the teacher, with the community, more discussion, and then more time with the tutor, or time with the tutor, because the other class doesn't have a tutor.
Hello? Okay. I just saw one thing in the training. I don't know who does the training, but there was something about culturally humble language or something, and I was wondering if you might elaborate about that.
Do you want to take it and I'll take it? You can take it. You can take it. So it's cultural humility, and we're using it as a framework. And so there's 3 tenets that are part of cultural humility as a framework. And really it was founded by to health practitioners here in the Bay Area. And what they saw within their profession is that they had a lot of experts offering advice to patients, and they were not receiving it. They were not following it. And so it made them really understand perhaps it's how we're meeting them, how we're sharing that content. Perhaps we're not really understanding the full complexity of it. And so they created this framework so that physicians could be really helpful in meeting people where they are at, sharing that information, understanding their concerns, and then being able to move forward effectively. So cultural humility is a framework, and it really starts off with one, self-reflection, ongoing self-reflection in the work that you are, where you're at. In addition to that, it really identifies what are some of the institutional systemic challenges, and then being able to question them. And then the third is really about being able to speak on perhaps minoritized groups that otherwise wouldn't be able to. So it's those three tenets of this framework that we're offering our students. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
Thank you, guys. We're going to do another little transition here, but I wanted to thank you all for being here. Let's give them one more round.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around for our talk. Today, our panel is going to be reflecting on equity-minded teaching. My name is Kyle Hill. I'm from the English department, and I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and allow them to introduce themselves.
Atia Fuchs, I'm from the mathematics department.
I'm Jonathan Siegman. I'm from the biology department, but I mostly teach nutrition.
I'm Lisa Velarde from the library.
And Marian Etlinger, ESL, and the Project Shine coordinator.
And then before I talk about our presentation for today, I do just want to let you guys know that we're handing out a half-sheet flyer that's going to provide you all with a link to our reflections on CUE this year. So if you're interested in reading more about what our experience was like, definitely go to that link and check out our online handout. But I want to start by giving you all an overview of what we're going to do. So to start, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Equity-Minded Teaching Institute that we all participated in was. And then we're going to start our faculty panel discussion. So first, let me just give you guys a little bit of information about CUE so you know what we did. So CUE stands for the Center of Urban Education. And the 5 of us, well, more than 5 of us, 8 of us participated in CUE's first ever Equity-Minded Teaching Institute. So that's really cool. We were part of the first group of faculty from across the country who were able to participate in this institute. The Center for Urban Education, the one that we participated in, is at the University of Southern California, their Rosier School of Education. And one thing that CUE is trying to accomplish is they're trying to achieve racial equity by partnering with educational systems to change policies and practices. But just as an aside, as a fun fact, I wanted to share with you guys that the University of Southern California's motto is, and I do not speak Latin or read it very well, so, but their motto is Palmon qui merit ferat, which essentially means achievement should be rewarded. So it makes sense why they're at the center of this latest admission scandal. What wealthy families were able to achieve on Photoshop was truly extraordinary, right? So if nothing else, this latest admission scandal reminds us all that great achievements in America start with wealthy, morally questionable parents. That was my attempt to tell a joke, but back to the matter at hand today. Thank you. But the Center for Urban Education at USC's Rosier School of Education curates the latest scholarship and best practices on achieving educational equity for racially minoritized students. But what the Equity Minded Teaching Institute was a year-long commitment on our part, with the primary goal of teaching us instructors how to better identify and respond to equity gaps in our classes by using strategies like actually looking out in our classroom and counting what the different racial groups in our classrooms are so that we can use that information to better recognize what's going on in our class and respond to it in ways that are actually informed by what we're seeing and experiencing in our classrooms. They taught us strategies like effectively using our syllabus in the first weeks of our course to establish an accessible and welcoming environment for students, particularly students who don't always feel welcomed in our classrooms. It taught us strategies like tapping into students' funds of knowledge or their lived experiences to make our classrooms more accessible to students. And it reminded us that it's important for us to emphasize threshold concepts or core ideas in our discipline to help open up or to help students become aware or more open to new ways of thinking that are fundamental within our disciplines. So what we've done this past year, it started in summer 2018. The 8 of us got together and we attended a conference in Los Angeles as the kickoff. And then we came back to City College in the fall of 2018 and we participated in monthly webinars, got together as a small group and discussed the things that we were learning and had sometimes challenging conversations about how to make our classrooms more equitable. And then in the spring, our task was to implement some of the things that we learned about in the fall, and then to prepare this panel as a way for us to close out our experience, the experience that we had together, and share with you all what we learned after spending this year together. So with that said, what we prepare for you guys today, or what we'd like to do is we would like to discuss 5 questions during this panel, which will hopefully give you all a better idea of what we learned in the Teaching Institute about how to identify and close equity gaps in our classroom, as well as to give us an opportunity to reflect on the things that we've learned and close out this experience for us as well. Hopefully, after we get through these 5 questions, you'll all be inspired to be more equity-minded in your classes. So let's see how this goes. Our first question, or the first question that I'm gonna ask our faculty panel is this. Why did you all sign up for the Teaching Institute? And so with these questions, we're all just going to take turns responding to them. So whoever wants to jump in there and answer this
I'll
first
go
question.
first. Okay. So again, I'm ESL department, And it's not exactly like equity population, but within ESL there are equity populations. But really, I think we can imagine there are a lot of obstacles and barriers. And so I teach a non-credit course. It's a pilot course for non-credit to credit transition into our new AB 705 accelerated sequence. And it's kind of equity designed in nature, that it's multi-level. If students need to repeat the course, they can, and we get them to the outcomes so that they can succeed in our sequence. So my big question was about retention. In non-credit, it's open enrollment, so we don't have managed enrollment. Students can come and go. They don't need to come to class every day. And we see a drop-off towards the end of the semester in general. So how could I motivate, become a better teacher, and keep the students in the class?
That's a hard-to-follow answer. I teach an online one-unit research skills class, and I also teach research skills workshops to classes from a bunch of different disciplines. And I was first inspired to learn more about equity through a presentation at my employee orientation here, where we learned about cultural humility. So it was presented by Dr. Veronica Neal, and that was my first exposure to learning about the difference between equity and equality, and how equity means that the students who need more help get more help, and equality is giving everybody the same thing. And then through my work with the Pathways Committee and with the RISE team, Reimagining the Student Experience, I began to learn about the huge improvements in success rates that other community colleges were seeing when they adopted an equity approach. And equity and pathways are very related. And I wanted to be a part of making that happen here at City College.
So I am relatively new to teaching. I am just wrapping up my 3rd year as a teacher, and in the spirit of learning and doing things better, I have tried to avail myself to opportunities, and some of you might have heard of AQ, which has one more letter at the beginning. I did that last year, learned a lot, and much of the focus was on equity and how to support your students who might have different starting points, and recognizing that many of my students look different to me, might not have had the same lived experiences as me. I'm seeking for ways to connect and support their learning and to lift everyone up. And so when I heard about this opportunity, I was very excited to build on what I had gained previously, also to connect with colleagues, and it has been really wonderful, and look forward to sharing more as the questions progress.
I want to start by echoing something that Lisa said, which is that I was initially very interested to kind of learn more about what equity is and how one brings equity into the classroom, what that even means. I was interested also because I would get to be part of a team. It's so easy to be so insular and to kind of be a member of your department and be a part of that community, but not to really know what goes on outside of that. So those were 2 huge motivating factors for me. But then once I got there, I realized also that in my field, which is math, one of our big questions is the achievement gap and closing it. And for me personally, the achievement gap extends beyond things like getting students to finish a transfer level math course, but getting students who are from traditionally underrepresented groups to feel encouraged and welcomed and empowered to consider not just taking one class and then getting math over with and never taking more, but instead to wish to explore more mathematics and to wish to go down maybe calculus-bound tracks and STEM tracks, and exploring why so many don't, why there's such a huge drop-off in women and people of color exploring those fields. So I was interested in kind of learning more and maybe changing aspects of my teaching that are contributing to part of that drop-off.
And then before we move on to our second question, I'm also going to be adding as well since I participated also. But I just wanted to add, or kind of echo what Jonathan was saying. I'm also a newer instructor here on campus. And my background is in equity. That's what I studied in grad school. So whenever I see the word equity, I'm like, oh, I'm all about it. I want to sign up for that. I can always learn more about equity. But since teaching here at City College, one thing that I've noticed is that even me, a young black man, an instructor who a lot of people would assume would have a lot more success retaining men of color, I noticed that I myself was struggling to keep young black and brown men in my class, and that's a population that I wanted to learn more about how to serve. But moving on to question number 2, I'm curious to know from the faculty panel, after going through this experience, what types of routines or habits are you aspiring to establish with your classes after participating in the Teaching Institute?
Now the hard questions. So I have a lot of routines in my class that I've always done. Like, there's always agenda, there's always outcomes on the board. The students know what they're going to do in the class. But in regards to retention, I started really thinking, like, well, what's the extra thing that I need to do and notice? And so I started really wanting to understand my students, and that's something that we've been taught to do a lot in this process. And so I found ways to do a lot more checking in with the students who did not attend regularly, or they came in late, because I didn't want them to feel like they were alienated from the class. Maybe there were good reasons, and I wanted my own affect to show that I'm supportive. Another thing that I found really, really important for that retention is that I have timely feedback and assessment with the students. Because the more I take them seriously, the more homework that they're going to do, turn in, and value. And the other big one is creating a cohort in the class. The environment that you set in the classroom can carry through an entire semester, and those students support each other, and they check in with each other if there's something going on, if a student misses a class. And then finally, I always kind of thought of teaching language acquisition as it's like an orchestra. I used to play violin in an orchestra, and you're like a conductor. You're weaving all of this acquisition together. But I felt like I needed to step back more, and I was finding ways to make sure that there was more equal time for students, because language acquisition requires a lot of production. And I will turn the question on, because I could go on and on.
Okay, so some of the things that I'm doing as a result of participating in the Institute are things like I'm being more conscious about offering different ways for students to share and participate in class, and to assess learning in the moment, and to offer feedback without singling anyone out in the moment. I'm doing things like using short online polls to like an easy way to participate and to get feedback. And I'm having students draw a concept map on paper. In my online class, I have them take a picture of it and upload it, and in my in-person workshops, I'll have them draw it on paper. I encourage small group discussion, very small sometimes, in 2s and 3s. And I also use shared online documents that we all edit live, so I can get an immediate sense of whether or not students understand what I'm talking about, and they can get the support from their other person that they're working next to. And then one of the things that I learned in the Institute that we learned especially benefits Latinx and Black students is to be more explicit about how, about what for students who succeed in this class, what is necessary to succeed, and like saying out front what that involves. And then another big thing is talking about the class in terms of we're partners in their success. I'm here to help them, and we're going to work together. You know, it's not just all on them. It's on me to reach out and make sure they have what they need, and they, you know, they know that I'm there for them. Oh.
So one of the things I really am trying to achieve in the classroom as a routine is to make it a safe, welcoming space that students are excited to come to, that they are participatory, that their voices are valued. And as part of this program, they suggested that, especially early on, we make an effort to get to know our students by name, which I had known was important, but even going so far as to stand outside the room and welcome them, maybe chat with some for a little bit, especially ones who maybe like to sit at the back. And it was a little awkward, but actually I really liked it, and I think it worked. And so early on, I knew everyone. No one could hide because I knew who they were. And I sometimes teach large classes. I teach that allied health nutrition class that Angela mentioned earlier. And it is large, and sometimes it's hard to connect with everyone one-on-one. And so I made part of the class routine a daily reflection. So I try to save the last 5 minutes of class for them to submit on Canvas. They can do it on their phones, but something new that they learned, what was the most interesting thing they learned, or what was something confusing. And I would read those, and it was an opportunity for people to share what they were getting out of the class. It was also a good way for me to get a pulse on what they were understanding or not, and I could reach out. And it was a great way also for students who weren't coming to class to check in, and I'm planning to do more of this, maybe even have in-person visits after the first exam. So that was some things I took away from the course, and I think really made a big difference.
One of the things that I've tried to focus on a lot is to try to take the emphasis that can sometimes, how do I say this? Sometimes math classes have the reputation that all that really matters is correctness. Did you get the right answer? And I tried a lot to kind of take the emphasis off of that in my classroom and just in my attitude, my affect, as Marian was saying earlier. I want to encourage students to think about how something might work. And it doesn't matter whether you know exactly how it's going to go all the way through, or even if you're going down the right path, it gives me an opportunity to get all of the voices kind of playing and working together. And I might have a student who kind of knows a beginning, and I'll say, you know, what do you think? And then they get stuck, but then we can get someone else in and we start a collaborative conversation. And it really takes the emphasis off of you can only speak and you can only have a voice if you know the right answer. And I think that it's lifted a lot of that stress that students sometimes experience. They sometimes call it math anxiety, they sometimes call it other things. But it's really helped me see that I don't need to be teaching this addiction to correctness. I can be teaching about thought and exploration and learning from wrongness. And that's been something that's really come from engaging in these conversations with my fellow faculty and learning from the webinars that have come with the Institute.
Thank you. Let's move on to question number 3. For question number 3, I'm going to ask for the panel to describe your experiences using threshold concepts or core ideas to promote equity in your classroom. And before I open it up for you guys to answer, I just want to say that using threshold concepts and core ideas was one of the key concepts that Q taught us over the course of this past year. And then I wanted to define what a threshold concept or a core idea was for everybody so that we're having the same conversation. But the most classic definition of a threshold concept is one that can be considered as akin to a portal, opening up a new and previously inaccessible way of thinking about something. It results in the learner understanding, interpreting, or seeing something in a new way. As a consequence of comprehending a threshold concept, there may thus be a transformed internal view of subject matter, subject landscape, or even worldview. And then I also wanted to share the 5 characteristics of threshold concepts. The first characteristic is that these concepts are transformative. The second characteristic is that they're irreversible. Once you know them, you know them. Third characteristic is that they're integrative. Fourth, they're bounded, so discipline specific. And then the fifth one is that they're troublesome. So they could be messy concepts that are not super easy to grasp right away, but that once you do know them, they're going to give you access into a discipline in a way that you wouldn't have been able to have access to it if you didn't know it. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask again, could you guys describe your experiences using threshold concepts or core ideas to promote more equity in the classroom? Yeah.
Okay. I was actually just inspired to think that I've sort of reached a different threshold myself in this process by learning about my students more in a reflective way. But the skill I might kind of reflect on here is academic writing, because in ESL we prepare our students in kind of a more formulaic way. We have to scaffold for them. They need language, and we need to teach them patterns and structures. And there's not always a lot of room for the creative part when we're in that beginning phase. And so what I would find are these kind of 2 or 3 different types of work that would come in that I would have to look at. And one of these, and all of that said, I'm coming from a place of privilege. Like, I don't struggle in that area of writing. I teach it, and I also have the American classroom culture privilege, where my students don't. And so I might receive some very beautiful metaphorical language that might be answering the question, but it's not really the way that it's expected as they move on to 1A eventually. And I just don't want to squash that creativity or find a way to help them tweak it so that they can have more authority in their writing, but not to take away what they're coming with. The other thing that I find a lot is this trying not to look at it as like a skills deficit thinking. Like they don't have the grammar, they don't have complex sentences, this kind of structural problems, not enough of the vocabulary and so on. So I try to encourage them with look, here's the skill, go back to the reading, look for the vocabulary, here's the structure and so on, but okay, I see the time here. Sorry. I'll go on and on. But what I want to say is that I have this knowledge and privilege, and I want to help my students reach that threshold concept, but with as much support as I can. And I'll pass it on.
So as a librarian, for this question, in the field of information literacy, and my librarian colleagues will appreciate this, especially college librarians, we're guided by a theoretical framework called the Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education. And it includes 6 core threshold concepts. So for our field, it's easy to take one of these core concepts and think about focusing instruction around it or trying to teach it. And one of the concepts that we focused on in the Institute with the other librarians that I worked with was the concept that authority is constructed and contextual. So the way we decided to teach this question, or to begin the conversation about this question, was to ask the question, who is the authority in your family when it comes to cars, or cooking, or technology, or religion, or money? And so the idea is to draw on their lived experience to understand that the authority of the person changes depending on the situation. And so it's kind of to get them to understand that there are different authorities in different spheres of knowledge, and that they themselves have authority over certain spheres of knowledge too.
Teaching nutrition, I sometimes think it's easy because the entry points are so obvious. We all eat. And I often start out the semester telling my students that collectively they know more about nutrition than I do, because as long as they've been alive, they've been eating and having experiences with food and observing that relationship with their diets and health and other outcomes. But nutrition in many ways is chemistry in disguise. And they don't realize that until we start getting to these seemingly complex topics of things you can't see. And so what I've been trying to do to get us thinking in this very small level of things that are conceptually challenging for many and that you can't see, is to think about this world of the microbiome, this whole world of little microorganisms that live on us and especially in us, and in particular in our gut, which is where the food we eat goes, and which is where 70% of our immune system is. And so starting from this, sort of getting us to think about this really small world, and I do some activities that put things into perspective, the scale of things, I think for me has been helpful in trying to get us thinking about the chemistry of things like carbohydrates and lipids. And I used Legos, things that many of them might have at least seen, some of them even used, in this idea that you can make bigger things out of smaller building blocks, and that the order matters, and that you have lots of different Legos and how you arrange them matters, but always drawing it back to food and things that they can relate to. And I'll often start classes with challenge statements around gluten. People like to talk about gluten, or carbohydrates, do they make you fat? That is a perception. Or is MSG, what is MSG? What is NutraSweet? Ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting. So all these things that they might have heard about that can be entry points to get us talking about that core knowledge.
One core idea that I think I try to play with a lot is the idea that mathematics, and a lot of science in fact, is about starting out with an assumption and then seeing how it fits into the grander scheme of the problem, or perhaps the world around us. And I have been doing sort of exploration sessions with every problem we do, rather than immediately starting by like, okay, how do you set up the equation? Rather saying, well, what's the question asking us, and what do you think is a reasonable answer to this question? Why do you think that's reasonable? Okay, you think that's reasonable. Does it fit with what the problem has set out for us as the scenario? And it's created an environment where everyone is allowed to have a voice, and everyone can say, well, I think this is reasonable, and we can talk about why is that reasonable. It gets us talking about things like units and context. It gets us talking about structures and what it means to either satisfy or not satisfy certain conditions. So we're looking at very simple, seemingly, and sort of innocent situations like a word problem. But underneath, we're talking about much deeper things, like what does it mean to satisfy logical conditions? What is a contradiction? When do you know that you've reached a contradiction? So these students are having very sophisticated conversations when we started with the question, what do you think is a reasonable answer to this question?
And then I actually want to add to this question. So I didn't realize before Q that I had already been using threshold concepts. I don't think I knew what to call it. I think I just had an instinct for it. But after Q, I realized that there were two. So I teach English 1A. And that class is interesting to me because we're very interdisciplinary. Like we're very interdisciplinary. We're always pulling from other disciplines to create our curriculum. But one threshold, or the two threshold concepts that I landed at, are that I thought that if students could understand these concepts, they could get access into my curriculum in a much deeper level, was one, the idea of critical reading and writing. So really demystifying for students what that meant and giving them a framework to use when they're critically reading and writing. And then the second concept is argument as conversation. So a big goal of 1A is that we're trying to get them to write a research paper. We want them to know how to weave together different voices out there in the scholarship to support an argument. So I realized that if I could get students to understand that what they're trying to accomplish is they're trying to enter into a conversation and weave together different voices to be persuasive, that idea, if they could really wrap their heads around it, would serve them not only in the research paper, but in the classes that they're going to go into after my classes, for some of the smaller, low-stakes assignments that we're doing. So like I said, Q helped me just find a name for what I was already doing, and then by being able to name it, it allowed me to focus on doing that even better. So I think for the sake of time, we're probably gonna just have a couple people speak to the last couple of questions. We've already started to talk about it, but another thing that Q emphasized or asked for us to think about this past year was, how do we draw on students' funds of knowledge or their lived experiences to give them more access into our course content? So I wanted to ask the faculty, maybe just if one or two of you could describe any experiences you've had or successes you've had tapping into your students' funds of knowledge or their lived experiences to make your courses, or to make the content of your courses, more accessible. Don't fight now.
I guess I'm always first. Well, I'll try to be brief. I think so. My students come with a huge range of experiences. They come from another country. They've lived here different amounts of time. They're different ages, different background, education backgrounds, and so on. Even different literacy rates. And I became really aware. I mean, I always kind of sensed that I didn't really know exactly what was going on in my students' head, because they don't always express themselves because they don't have the language. But I've realized over time that if you just keep talking to them, like after class, I had one student who I couldn't figure out why he was responding the way he was in class discussions, and then he came up to me after class and kept having these very spiritual conversations with me. And I thought, this is how he's framing what he's experiencing in the classroom. And it was completely fair to look at the context that I was presenting, because everything we do in ESL, we need a context. And so he was somehow framing it in a way that worked for him. And by doing things like, say, having like Nucella projects where students choose the content that they want to bring into the class and share with each other, was really powerful. And I ended up having the strongest cohort last semester around these projects. And they just invited me to come have lunch with them next Friday. But here, I'll pass this on to someone else. So.
They're making me say something. So I actually have a student in one of my classes this semester who came up to me after class one day, and she and I were talking, and she said to me, you know, what you're telling us to do is really hard for me because I hate being wrong. And I struggle with it at home, I struggle with it in my family, I struggle with it in my daily life, that I have a really hard time being wrong. And I realized, and this is something Marion mentioned earlier, kind of the positions of privilege in which we sit, which is that I have years of training in mathematics, which is essentially years of training in the comfort in being wrong almost all the time. And I realized that it was something I never kind of trained my students in, that you're going to be wrong almost all the time. But there's going to be value in that, and it's not going to be a mark of some kind of lack of some quality on your part. It's part of the discovery that we start out thinking something might work a certain way, and then it doesn't. And so that was an illuminating experience for me as an educator, that I am comfortable with things that they need my help being comfortable with. And it's really been challenging to me to kind of shape my teaching in a way that keeps that in mind.
Thank you. And for our last question, maybe we'll have Jonathan and Lisa share. We wanted to end today with this question. Has the Teaching Institute helped you better identify equity gaps in your classes? Because that was the goal of the Teaching Institute. So Jonathan and Lisa, was it a success for you both? And maybe elaborate a little bit on how so.
So I think I'm certainly, it has helped me be more aware. I mean, it's always been my goal to help everyone succeed and to close achievement gaps, but I think through this being more intentional, really being aware of people's lived experiences are not mine, and of course I know that, but really emphasizing that and finding ways that I, even though I can't change how I appear in my own lived experience, at least I can acknowledge the diversity of experiences amongst my students, get them to share through getting to know them better, also in the materials that I use, showcasing people who don't always look like me, and even sort of looking at the slides that come from the textbook and what is normative, and addressing that. So I think another thing too, and when I was referring to you earlier, is you shared with us, and we would check in every month, and about the students really finding the material challenging, and often they find nutrition challenging as well. And you shared with me this insight that our students face a lot of really challenging situations, and they navigate being parents, they navigate working multiple jobs, things that, and I'm not a parent, I mean, I think raising a child is really requires lots of thoughts and care, and is quite challenging. And sort of saying, look, you're doing all these amazing things. You can, applying it to our classroom, and even though the material is different, maybe sort of that agency and that that they can do it, I think was really, so I found the experience really helpful.
So I interpreted this question kind of literally, and when I thought about identifying equity gaps in your classes, I was reminded that right when we started the Equity Institute, we were provided with data compiled by Micheline Pontius in the Office of Research and Planning on our specific classes, showing equity gaps in, among our classes. So my data showed only a 70% success rate for my African American students, as compared with an 82% success rate for my white students and 85% success rate for my Asian and Latinx students. So that helped me identify that the equity population I wanted to really focus my efforts on was going to be my African American students. And so that's kind of how I, identified that equity gap. But I just wanted to offer a closing comment about participation in the Institute, which is that we really cultivated a community of trust and openness in talking about difficult topics. It might not seem like it from our presentation, but we all kind of grappled with a lot of questions together, and discussing issues of race and culture and identity really in an open and trusting format really supported all of us. And all of you should be welcome to reach out to us if you want to talk about this more. And I just wanted to put that out there, that it's, it can be difficult to take on at first, and but I'm super glad I did it. And I think we all are.
And I don't think I could say anything better than that. So instead of trying, I'm just going to thank you all for listening. And I just want to remind everybody that we have prepared an online handout for you all with our reflections on the Teaching Institute this past year. So if we're hope that you're curious and you want to learn more about what we're taking away from the Institute. Thanks again.